Yeah, but
Yeah.
yep.
It's been a while for that.
Time when erasers were a thing to have. To get
That's a
ready
big,
for
that's a big Starbucks you got there.
Yes.
It's just the grande.
What?
It's just the grande.
I mean, big is.
Oh, the court.
All right, are we ready? Awesome, let's get going. All right, I'd like to call to order the Metro Council work session of September 10th, 2024. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Lewis,
Present.
Counselor Rosenthal,
Present.
Counselor Wong,
Present.
Counselor Gonzalez,
Present.
Counselor Nolan is joining us shortly. And Counselor Simpson is excused today, and Council President Peterson.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum, we'll get going. Before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
Yes.
Members. I'm at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairway to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk, and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the reception desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at Portland 5.
All right, we'll move on to our first agenda meeting. First thing on the agenda. Wow, can't talk today. Heidi, if you want to come up, our zoo director, with any of your team members. Our first work session today is a presentation discussion with the Oregon Zoo staff about the bond implementation plan. The council approved the draft Oregon Zoo campus plan last year at our October 26th meeting. And the Oregon Zoo staff are here to follow through on their commitment to voters to present the implementation plan to Metro Council that they made for this fall. Today, Metro Council will consider the proposed sequencing for the campus projects, and Zoo staff will share how they evaluated and developed this phasing recommendation. Heidi, I'll turn it over to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us here. So with me is Kristen Solomon, our campus plan project manager, and Heidi Ron, the Oregon Zoo director. Utpal Posse could not join us today as he is selecting the new point of sale service provider, which I think you can all recognize is very important to us. So as we covered, the first phase of our implementation planning for the bond is figuring out our sequence of projects. And then we will go into more detailed planning from there. We're going to take you through how we got to that today. So next slide. The policy question that will be before you is around, do the recommended campus plan and the proposed sequencing of projects serve the needs of our animals, visitors, and facilities, fulfill your direction and policy, and reflect community and stakeholder input? Next slide. Just to bring you in the way back, when we developed the campus plan, we followed the strategic drivers that were our strategic focus areas for the zoo as part of our strategic plan. And that is really focusing on animal care and well-being, conserving wildlife, focusing on our guests, creating a welcoming environment, connecting with our communities, providing great staff experiences, and having a sustainable financial pathway. What we heard, next slide, from you in the process is you were pretty clear in your direction that the zoo should continue to lead with our conservation efforts and connect our community to educational opportunities for wildlife. It's also important to you that we engage our community in the campus planning process and design a future that reflects where our members, partners, and visitors want us to head. The Metro Council has been driving policies forward with a focus on climate resilience and sustainability, which is aligned with our work to support wildlife and operate efficiently. And ensuring we are a community hub for all has been our top priority. This shows up not only in our campus plan, but in our guest experience, new programs, and community partnerships. Next slide. So to walk you through where we've been, you approved our draft campus plan previously. The only thing that you're seeing different today is a proposed sequence of projects. In May, our community approved future investments at the zoo and once again demonstrated their commitment to the community treasure of the Oregon Zoo. In June, we had our land use hearing and we received our land use permit to proceed with implementation of the campus plan. And the city of Portland did not have any significant changes to the plan. So all you're seeing differently is a proposed sequence. So we have the campus plan, we have the permit, and we have the funding. Next. Graphically, we use this map of the zoo to show you all that was developed in the last round of bond investments in the dark green, and then the rest of the zoo that needs continual investment. We will not be able to do all of this with the zoo bond that was just passed, but we will show you how we prioritize the areas. Next slide. We always go back to our ballot measure commitments, and those were focusing on animal health and well-being, conservation education, conserving water and energy, being a welcoming zoo for all, and enhancing our species recovery efforts. And there's Tamu, our baby rhino, who now weighs 750 pounds. So he's grown quite a bit. Next slide. So the ballot measure explanatory statement noted that we would bring you an implementation plan for discussion in the fall. So here we are. The first start of that is to identify the sequencing of projects. Then we will go through more detailed refinement of budgets, program budgets, project budgets, and staffing. So Kristen's going to walk you through how we evaluated our scenarios and came to a recommended path. Next slide. Oh, I will first cover on what the implementation priorities were when we evaluated our different scenarios. Obviously, animal well-being, that's our driver consistently, and we know that there are certain areas that we need to address to maintain AZA accreditation. Continuing to inspire our guests and connect them to wildlife and creating those educational experiences. We have infrastructure that is at risk of failure, so prioritizing where we have infrastructure health issues, where we have the highest risk and where we're the most ready for investment, and then aligning back to our strategic drivers. All right, next slide, and I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Great, thanks, Heidi. Right here, you're seeing a map of our prioritized projects. We had a big list of projects that were important to us that scored highest on the categories you just mentioned. And when it came into what we could physically do and what was best for the animals, here's where we landed. So the first two projects, we're grouping them into one. The entry plaza and the Polar Plaza shelter you'll see up there highlighted. Those are our forward-facing projects where we'll be creating a welcoming space, a gathering space for the zoo, and solving accessibility issues as well, amenities for guests. And it's a really opportunity to reflect our mission statement right off from the get-go. These two projects are not animal related, which allows us to move a lot faster when they're animal related habitats. There's just more involvement in a longer timeline. So we are starting off quick and strong with those two projects. And then going into, you see the two arrows focusing into the next project, which is Coastal Shores, our marine life habitat. There are opportunities here to solve some aging infrastructure. This is the location in the zoo with our oldest buildings, some of them dating back to the late 1950s. So opportunities for modernization there, and also to highlight our conservation program with the sea otters. Next from there, we will move on to the African savanna on the southern portion of our campus, which is for giraffe and black rhino. The way this is designed is going to create ample space for a larger herd of giraffe, which we don't have space right now for, and also highlight our SSP, Species Survival Program, with black rhino. From there, we're moving on to predators with wild dog and lion. And then moving on to our south hub, you can kind of see the merry-go-round down there of lots of amenities with a restaurant, a lawn, a plaza, a new ambassador building and herpetarium. And this is kind of an opportunity for a focal point at the southern part of the campus when you're halfway through your zoo visit. And then ending with upgrades to our primate habitats. So there's a very specific flow and sequencing to this, and it all came about focusing on keeping animals in their homes as long as possible. It's not only good for the animals, it's better for the guest experience. So for example, the area that will be savanna will be the current habitat or animals will be moved out of that area. The savanna will be built, a new habitat for giraffe and rhino, and it'll be built while giraffe and rhino are currently in their home, so they can be seen normal. When their new habitat is ready, giraffe and rhino get moved over, and then the space that is vacated is the next up for renovation. So that's kind of how we march through the plan. We are tight on space. We don't have a lot of room to like branch out. So this is the best sequencing given all the current constraints and conditions of the site. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll kind of see how this all lays out graphically, starting on the left with the entry plaza and shelters, going up diagonally, ending with the primate expansion. And then I really want to note the brown bar at the bottom is showing that we're not just doing these big projects in green. We also have a heavy lifts in terms of infrastructure improvements, upgrading existing habitats that might not get the full overhaul, but there's a lot of stuff that will be going on in conjunction with these larger lift distinct projects.
Next slide. You will be involved at many steps along the way. We will be in constant reevaluation, recalibrating. We have a solid plan currently, but we need to be ready to adjust to changes in the economy, animal care standards, endangered species recovery needs, and community priorities. Any changes to project sequencing will be presented to you all for further review. You'll be continuously engaged in our project budget approval via the capital improvement plan process. You will be appointing a citizens oversight committee per the commitment in the ballot measure, and that committee will report on progress annually. And any alternative procurement processes that require council approval will be presented in partnership with Metro's procurement team. You will also be engaged in significant design and construction milestones throughout the duration of the zoo's campus development. Next slide. So to reiterate, we are in our first phase of discussion with you around implementing our commitments in the ballot measure. Adopting the final campus plan this month, including the proposed sequence of projects, allows us to move into a more detailed phase of planning. We're currently hiring the director of campus development for the Oregon Zoo, and they will build out the new team that will be responsible for implementing the campus plan and meeting the commitments in the ballot measure. This team will need some time to dive into the work and build a more detailed program plan. The new director will work with our finance team to build the program budget and the associated project budgets. We will partner with the Oregon Zoo Foundation to project additional fundraising campaign contributions to enhance the overall budget. And we will align project scopes with the available resources. What we learned from our last successful ballot measure implementation was the need for a solid program and project budget contingency. We will incorporate contingency and cost escalation into our next phase of budget planning. So to be clear also, the budget estimates in this campus plan are just that. They're best budget estimates. Official program and project budgets will come back to you for further approval once we have alignment on the project sequence. Next slide. So back to our policy question. Are you comfortable with us bringing a resolution forward later this month, or are there changes you would like to see or further direction you would like to give us as we go through prioritizing and refining our path forward? Thank you.
Thanks for the update and the ask. Counselors, we do have an 11 a.m. meeting agenda item with honored guests who are already here. So I just want to be cognizant of their time. So we have about 13 minutes to have this conversation. Sorry to rush y'all, but I think it's understandable. And I don't want to give short shrift to this topic because it is so important. I'll just kick it off with a thank you for acknowledging a little bit about the email that we all received from the auditor. Anything more that you want to just put an exclamation point on there, that this is that's an upcoming phase,
Yes.
and you are well aware of the auditors.
I appreciate the feedback early on from the auditor to make sure we're having adequate program and project contingency, and I commit to making sure that we have that built into the plan. Absolutely. That will be the next phase of refinement.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mhm.
Counselors, Counselor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I want to commend the team not only for doing the work of taking what was bond language and making it a construction timeline manageable, but I think what went unsaid is the work that you've done to contingency plan based around the fact that AZA and the broader conservation community can ask us to step up at any time in different species. There obviously are local species like otter and butterfly and turtle and frog that we know that we are lead on, condor. But if there's a big change in some of the larger animals or those that aren't native to the Pacific Northwest, do you think that we are still flexible enough to be able to say yes to critical species?
Yes, I think the way we've lined up the sequence allows us to have time to plan for that and get ready for any potential changes in the other standards, animal needs. So the first project, we're teed up and ready to go with animals we know we will have and that we will continue to prioritize. And then those last few phases allow us to be flexible where we know the AZA community and the government entities working on species recovery want us to be flexible. And we are looking with those government entities right now to plan out what those species are going to be. And we're looking at potentially doubling the number of species that we are working to help recover.
That's awesome. Thank you. Can I ask one more question? I think that we at Metro are really proud of the work that we've done our long construction careers. And when you come back to us for resolution, I would like to make sure that we have language in there around our plan to execute projects in a way that is moving the needle on our construction careers, working with labor and working with smaller subcontractors who don't normally get a bite at the apple in our kind of zoo projects that are highly specialized.
Will do. Thank you.
And I'd be happy to talk offline about that as well.
Great.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Counselor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a real quick question, maybe it's sort of a hypothetical, assuming if the bad situation were to occur and we were to get a spike in inflation, for example, would it be correct to assume that it of course would affect the project costs on the other ones, but that an option would be to say drop off the final ones on the list? In other words, completely implement the earlier ones, and for example, the primate upgrade might just go away as part of that contingency. Is that, or would we just try and scale back the individual areas?
I think either or both, right? I mean, I think that's a conversation we will always have with you as we go along in terms of the pros and cons before we make a decision like that. But we certainly could just punt a project, fundraise for a project, or refine the scopes to scale back on the other ones to make sure we get to the final one.
Okay, and if I might, one real short question on that figure that you showed, there was a green area right above the entryway. I'm assuming that was artistic license. We're not doing anything about converting the parking lot into a green space.
That is not, what you just mentioned is not part of the plan. I'm trying to think of the diagram that we showed. One thing about that diagram is that it highlighted all the projects in the campus plan.
Yeah.
And then the arrows pointed to what we're delivering in this next round. So it's possible that something highlighted was part of the plan, but yet not part of this implementation prioritization. But no plans for what you just mentioned with the parking lot.
No,
right now.
no plans for modification of the parking lot, which is not ours anyhow.
Correct.
That's not in our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
I will say, as the chair of the Explore Washington Park Board, that we are prioritizing looking at upgrades to those spaces and the kind of TriMet Plaza area.
Okay.
All right, Counselor Huang, and you can turn on your camera.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Just on the Citizen Oversight Committee, can you speak a little bit more about the size and composition and kind of the skill sets that you'll be recruiting for? And are there any like specific constituencies or skills that kind of are must-haves or, you know, delegated to that like position?
Yeah, we have a lot of experience with a successful Citizens Oversight Committee with the last zoo bond, and the critical experience that comes forward is a mix around legal, construction, sustainability, animal well-being, climate resilience, accessibility, essentially all of the priorities you see us trying to deliver on and the outcomes we're trying to achieve. We want to make sure there are experts and people that can speak to that gain the confidence of the community that we are delivering in those areas. So we will be working with you to build that up and help to find those folks over the next probably 6 months. And in terms of numbers, I don't recall exactly what we have listed. If anything, in general, the last time we had 13 to 18.
Okay. And then like do proposals go to the Oversight Committee like for approval before they're implemented?
We discuss it with the Oversight Committee, but they don't have approval authority. We just make sure they're raising and bringing any concerns to the table that they might bring back to us later. But essentially, they're looking back to make sure we delivered on what we committed to. You all have that authority in terms of budget and priority approval, but we engage them along the way.
Great, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands raised. Thank you for all the work to get to this point. I know it's a big lift on each part of these things, and the bigger lift is still yet to come, but thank you for getting this before us and letting us see where you're headed. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
Thanks. All right, if we're ready, we can move on to the next council agenda item on the 2025 state legislative transportation priorities. In our work session today, we will discuss and give feedback on the draft JPAC priorities, which will be presented by Councilor Gonzalez. But we also have two very special guests, Senator Chris Gorsuch and Representative Susan McLean, the co-chairs of the Oregon Joint Transportation Committee. They are here today to give us a overview of what they're hearing as they are out on tour. They're not a hard rock band, but they could be.
But just as cool.
There's a justice band.
But just as cool.
And trying to figure out how to move our state forward. So, Annalisa, would you like to come up and kick off the presentation? Annalisa Curler is here, our Metro's Legislative Affairs Manager. Thank you.
Thank you so much, counselors. And I'm going to be very short and sweet in this moment. You'll be hearing a little bit more from me after our special guest comes. So I'm just going to actually invite them up right now. Representative McLean, Senator Gorsuch, if you want to join me up here.
Okay, we get to start.
Yeah, well, welcome.
Exciting.
Just as you're sitting down, I just want to say personally, thank you for all of the work that you both have put in. I am in constant contact. I think Councilor Gonzalez and our JPAC reps are in constant contact with you as with the rest of the council. So thank you for taking all of our calls. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for considering all of the individual needs around the state as well, and the time and commitment that you've made to get something going. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I always love to see the zoo master plan and plans for the future. My dad worked at the Portland Zoo as a young man in the 40s. And I always just loved to see that we were on the top end of really trying to make sure that we were more than a zoo, but always trying to really deal with the care of animals and looking at extinction and trying to be part of the solution for that. So it was a joy to be able to come a little early. My name is Susan McLean, and I am a basically a representative who serves Western Washington County out in House District 29. And this is my partner. And I'm happy to start out with, is that okay? And so basically we work both on the I-5 bridge and we are really working diligently. This is our 7th year of being co-chairs of the I-5 bridge and really working on that project. And that project is parallel to what we're working on right now at the state, which is dealing with our transportation system, dealing with an upgrade and a modernization of the tools that we use to pay for transportation. And there's a reason for that. First of all, we have a multimodal transportation system. Our first goal is safety. And safety is something that we consider to be for all modes in all places. And that means that we need a seamless system that includes the city, the county, and the state roads. And of course, your region is 3 counties and at least 24 cities once in a while. I don't know, we're 23, 24 right in there. And it's important for us to really try to make sure that we have a complete, ongoing, stable, and diversified funding tool. So that's one of the things we've been working on in the last 2 years as we've been talking to folks. We know that JPAC has been working diligently to really look at all of the different needs in the region and to really try to cooperate with each other and really support each other in what the major frontline goals are. So we have been on a tour. And our tour across the state has basically been really interesting and really reaffirming that all the cities, the counties, and the state believe that we have a need. And that need is there for a wide variety of reasons. And one is that the gas tax is going down as far as the amount of available funds for actually funding our multimodal system. It also is because we have more efficiency in our cars. And we are really working hard on making sure that transit and buses and bicycles and micro mobility vehicles, and I guess those are the 45-mile-per-hour scooters and all of those other things, and that we have an understanding of how the system works, how we create space for everyone, how we make sure it's safe space. And so the tour has been we are starting on Thursday this week over in Bend and then going up to the Dalles, and that's our 9th and 10th stop. And we are hearing everyone say, we all need to make sure we're working, number one, on maintenance and operations. And that is going to be the next step, is going into work groups where we talk about things like maintenance and operation, getting back to basics. Our second work group that's coming up, and we'll be starting these in October, that we are basically looking at transit and all things micro mobility. And the third area is completing commitments and anchor projects that have already been started, like the Rose Quarter and Highway 205 and the Abernathy Bridge and 217. Those are what we promised with the package in 2017. Those are where we've already put investment. Those are already in progress, and they're going to get completed. So that third group will be talking about how we do that, what the challenges are in still finishing. We know for Rose Quarter, for example, the project is different than it looked in 2017 because we took on the responsibility of working with Albina and Portland and Metro and others on trying to make sure that we are really bringing back a community that was split from the original highway that was put in the 60s. So it's really important to us that we get that work done. So after the tour ends at the end of September, then we go to work groups, which will work in October and November and December and early January. And we will be giving them as co-chairs a task, and that task will be to answer questions and to look at investment and needs in those 3 areas of those work groups that I basically suggested. So we're interested to hear what you're going to decide are the top goals that you're going to believe that you're bringing to us from your region and the 23 or 24 cities that you work with. And we are just here to answer questions, but we're here also to say thank you for being part of the team. And now I turn it over to my co-chair.
Well, thank you, Susan. Good morning, everyone. I'm State Senator Chris Gorsick, District 25, that's Gresham, Troutdale, Wood Village, and Fairview. One of the things that's come up repeatedly as we've gone around the state has to do with equipment. And one of the things that we're seeing in a lot of places is it's not just infrastructure that's wearing out, but it's the equipment to maintain the infrastructure, which is wearing out. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves at the time where a lot of the interstate system is on the later stages of its life. And so that is part of our problem, is that we need to maintain things. Sometimes we have to replace things like the interstate bridge, but we definitely have a situation where there's not enough equipment and not enough new equipment. So in some of the ODOT facilities that we have visited, there was one place, I think it was in Albany, where they share a street sweeper for, I think it's with 3 counties. And that's really, that's not a good approach. And, you know, I think what we've done is we've just kind of slowly, these things have kind of added up, slowly accruing. And so it's definitely part of what we have to look at. It becomes very serious when you start to look at areas that have a lot of snow. We're down in the Medford area and Ashland, and they of course talked about Siskiyou Summit. I don't know if you've ever driven Interstate 5 there. It's a lovely, beautiful stretch of road that gets very, very, very bad in the winter. And, you know, we found that they only have one big truck that they can use to push people out of the way. And so, you know, it's things like that that we're seeing over and over, that there's just not enough. The other thing, of course, is for whatever reason, in the state of Oregon, we have a lot of people who still resist us taking care of the road system. And everything that's suggested is somehow a huge expansion of the freeway system. Rose Corridor is what, 1.8 miles? It's auxiliary lanes that we're trying to add there. And now the cap, it is not wholesale freeway expansion. The Portland metropolitan area hasn't done anything like that since the proposed Mount Hood Freeway, which I remember that very, very well. And it was a fascinating thing to watch. The problem is now that in some parts of the state, especially our area, people are convinced that no freeway is, or corrections to the freeway system is okay. Whether you have EVs or hybrids or whatever, you're still going to have traffic and you still have to deal with that traffic. And one of the things that's a big problem for us is the truckers are extremely important in moving freight through Oregon. And we are, it's nice, we're a double, we can get to score twice. We're a double roadblock when you think about I-5 bridge, and then you also think about Rose Corridor. So there's a lot of things that we are seeing people, especially in other parts of state, acknowledge that, but there is still a certain amount of resistance. What's really interesting is if you get out of the Portland area, then people are willing to talk about the T word much more than, say, in the Portland metropolitan area. So there's a few differences of opinion. But I think overall, what we found is that everybody agrees that the system needs assistance, and we cannot afford to not have an answer in the 25 session.
Agreed. And before I turn it over to any questions the counselors have, I just want I didn't do my due diligence in acknowledging that Representative McLean was also a former Metro councilor.
Right.
And we are lucky to have that experience in the legislature, so thank you. And Senator Gorsuch, all of the work that you're doing just around the future of the region regarding rail. I really appreciate the future vision that you just personally hold, so thank you.
Can I add one
Yeah.
thing? Both my co-chair and I have said in a public place for 6 months that we support the 50-30-20.
Oh,
Oh,
And that we both feel that it's extremely important for good partnering that we try to keep that. But I also want to say that you will hear some of our peers who will say that the 50-30-20 is not the only sharing that we do sharing of different amounts with our STIP programs, and that there are, 3 or 4 other formulas that share with the cities and counties. So I just want you to know that you have 2 co-chairs that really believe that being a good partner means that we share our revenue and that we share our resources, because again, the general public doesn't care who
That's
owns the
right.
road. All they want is the pothole to be filled, and they want it to be safe when their child goes across the street to get to their school.
Yep.
And so that's what we're going to be working on.
awesome. Thank you. Counselors, Counselor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. Do we have some slides? Am I correct on that?
We do have some slides.
Okay, did we want to go through those briefly or?
Well, I think just on this presentation by the co-chairs, any questions to the co-chairs from counselors before we go into it?
Okay, excellent. No, I think I'm okay. I do
Okay.
have some remarks, but they're connected to the
Yeah,
slide,
yeah,
so we'll wait for that.
exactly.
Thank you.
We're just here to say hello, and then we'll go off and let you do your work.
Any questions?
Okay,
Yes,
well-
Counselor Gonzalez.
Okay, well, in that case, I want to make sure I share some remarks before you leave.
Yeah,
Because it's important. I think we really value you coming. You've been such phenomenal leaders at the state level, really racking up the miles on your shoes and on however you get around. And with that leadership, we felt it was really important for you to be here with the council and for the council to hear directly from you. So, we're very grateful. And I want to share a little bit about the work that we've done at JPACT, and a lot of the themes are very similar to what you've heard, but I still think there's value to repeating it. President Peterson mentioned that Representative McLean was a Metro councilor, so did some a good little wiki search here. But for those that don't know, Rep. McLean served for 4 terms. Ran in 1990, so knows about Metro very well. So thank you for your service, Rep. McLean. And of course, is a District 4 councilor. It wasn't District 4 back then, right? But anyway, so with as elected leaders, we rely heavily on our staff. So our staff, I feel, have done a tremendous job doing homework, engaging with all of our regional partners here to come up with a vision, a plan, and a document that will help and support you in 2025. And so we've developed a draft set of priorities with a pretty clear consensus from JPACT. A lot of that feedback you've talked about is an emphasis on freight and intermodal connectivity. There's an emphasis on safety, talking about local communities that are also experiencing a fiscal cliff and attacking local needs. And I mentioned that there's a lot of similarity to what you're hearing at the statewide level, is the conversations that are happening here locally on JPAC. But we do have a few themes that we've come up together, and they're very conveniently on the slide here. Short-term funding solutions, which, as you know, looking to stabilize where we are now. And there's been a lot of conversation about retaining the 50-30-20. So really appreciate you bringing that up. And in terms of long-term sustainable funding, ensuring that we're developing long-term sustainable multimodal investments and revenue sources that support all of our agencies. To finish what we started, safe urban arterials, transit, resiliency are all themes that have really come up at the JPAC level. And over the next few months, we're hopeful to because there's such strong support for our values and our priorities, that we'll be able to get an approved set of JPAC priorities here pretty soon, which is, we're quite proud of that. I want to open it up though to Councilor Lewis as my JPAC, one of my JPAC partners. Anyone else on the council to share for anything else related to JPAC?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. I think that the work of JPAC at helping center where the needs really are is good for us as a region, but doubly so for you. So you do not have to sort through city on county, and you can instead look at a regional list. So we want to do that work for you to help kind of roll up our project list, even though I want to underscore my belief is that 80% of the gravitational force of this package has to be in funding and transition so that we have long-term stability. Yes, we have the short-term cliff that we're all facing, but my hope is that we put as much emphasis in being revenue positive and in a growth mindset for our transportation system into the future. I had the rather unique experience, and some would say privilege, of joining the process in 2017. I participated in now Congressman Bence's maintenance table, and at the time there were 4 work groups, and we were the least popular of the work groups. And this time around, it seems like operations and maintenance is going to be the most popular, and I think that is prudent. So thank you for shifting those priorities, and I think some of it's the urgency we feel with funding, but it's also where we are as a state, back to basics and delivering. And I do think that across the board, we have jurisdictions who do a good job at taking care of what they have when they have the resources to do it. We do not have jurisdictions that have contracting problems out the wall. We've got jurisdictions who are good partners. And then speaking to finish what we started, that's particularly important for me in my district. Yesterday, 205 was at complete failure due to a crash. It took me 40 minutes to go 2.6 miles to pick my kid up from school. And preschool is close enough, 2.6 miles, that in theory, looking at all of that dark red on the map, I should have just taken my bike or walked. But I would have gotten there faster, but literally would have been on the side of a cliff with no sidewalk. And we are in a position where we don't have those multimodal systems. And when we have a highway failure, our local streets and our arterials fail. So that is why I am extremely supportive of finish what we started, particularly with the highway projects. That is ODOT's responsibility. And you've got a champion here in completing those projects. And then when it comes down to resiliency, I think resiliency can mean so many different things. I think we've got a system that when we have that emergency, when we have the wildfire, we feel the pinch, but we don't necessarily extrapolate that out to non-road. So thinking through when we have a really hot day or a really cold day, the TriMet Max is the lines freeze. So how do we think through operations through resiliency as well as the infrastructure for resiliency? And that comes down to people. And I know that's a hard conversation with ODOT and having enough staff and doing the work. But I encourage you to have those hard conversations. So I look forward to following along and being as helpful as I can, helping convene my cities and the county, the counties, but most particularly the county where I live, working really hard to be a good team player. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other JPAC counselor? No, we don't have another one.
Yeah, Councilor Simpson.
Any response? That's just JPAC counselors at this point who have commented. And you've seen the list.
Well, I think you raised some very important points. And to go back just for a moment to personnel, the estimate from ODOT is that we will lose a substantial number of ODOT workers if we don't do something in 25. And they're already substantially reduced. And, the state's been playing all sorts of, kind of plug the hole here and there. When we lost OSP as a major force on freeways, then the idea was, let's send ODOT incident response teams to do what they used to do. Well, guess what? Now we're running out of the money to fund them. I mean, we've played a lot of different ways of doing this. We can't afford to go much further down the road. And if you can imagine, in some cases, what we've heard is a halving of the crews that are out there. It's just, it's not sustainable. Kind of reminds me of years ago when Fred Meyer, where I worked for a little while, they every year thought that they should have fewer hours than the year before. And it's like, well, eventually you run to the point where nobody is there. And the state is kind of trying to do that same thing. And I'll tell you, we have talked to some amazing ODOT employees who really care about their jobs. And so we have to do whatever we can to support that up. But you see the same thing at the county. You see the same thing at the cities. When we were here in Portland, we visited the bridge shop down here under the Hawthorne. 12 people to maintain a whole bunch of old bridges. I mean, that's just one of many examples. And we're dealing with technologies that are like from 1910. The one thing they had just done a repair on required them to go on eBay to find the part. So, I mean, we're also, with the lack of resources, we're expecting them to pull rabbits out of hats, really.
Yep.
So, yeah, the personnel issue, though, is very substantial. Yeah.
Could I mention two more things? My co-chair mentioned something I think was really important, and that is we're already partnering.
Yeah.
We're partnering on equipment, we're partnering on personnel. I mean, we talked to so many people on this tour that said our best partners are ODOT.
That's right.
We share equipment, we share people.
Yeah.
We had a snowstorm that we couldn't have handled by ourselves, but together as a team, we handled it. And so we know that we have to work together. The second item that I think we haven't said that we should, and that is the state can't do this by ourselves, right?
No,
and that means what we need is we need our local elected officials. We need our local regional council. We need everyone to help with education of the general public.
That's right.
Because the general public doesn't get to spend all day, every day, listening, looking at the data, the need, and trying to figure out what is the reasonable tool and solution package.
Mhm.
And so we all have to take on that responsibility with our media, with our elected officials, with our staff, with everyone working together in a multitude of, we speak out all the time and we get a chance to, huh? And so it's one of those things where we go anywhere we're invited.
Oh, yeah.
And we do it on Zoom or one of us.
Even here.
Company accepted.
But I mean, I'll do anything for this staff, but and
There you go.
everybody.
Yeah.
But we, whether he's online and I'm in person, or I'm online and he's in person, or we're both together, we make an effort, and
Yeah.
we know you will too.
Yeah.
But we need you. And the general public needs you, because they need to hear from everyone what the need is. And the fact is, if we do nothing or do not find a mid-term tool and a long-term tool to be sustainable, we're done.
Yeah.
Because there's no way we're going to, be able to catch up. We already have a gap, and we have to fill that gap, and we have to have a pragmatic plan of modernization and going forward.
Yeah.
So I see it as I only have one life to give, right? And this is God, so we need to get this done.
Nicely done.
The one thing that's good about the whole structure, though, that in terms of how everything's been put together, ODOT always at the beginning of a public hearing gets about 10 minutes to really kind of lay things out and to show the budget slides and things like that. So it's partly educational, as well as educational for us in listening to what other people are concerned about, although we get a lot of that too on the round table. But we're trying to have it so that it's information both ways. And also, I think a lot of people appreciate the roundtables because we're not just coming in and talking at people, we're talking with
Yeah.
people. And
It's a
so
dialogue.
Yeah, collaboration is extremely important.
Awesome. Counselor Rosenthal had a question.
Well, actually, it's more of a comment than a question. There's an implied question there. First of all, I want to thank you for your efforts to go out. I've heard you make the presentation 3 times in the last 6 days. So that's a lot. I hope it doesn't keep going at this pace.
Committed Metro Councilor. Yeah.
And the presentation, and I get questions from people, whether it's city councilors or a public, and they ask me. And so what I'm telling them is I'm trying to summarize the 3 or 4 things that you are stressing. One is that the 50, 30, 20 commitment. Another one is a very strong commitment on the part of at least a lot of the legislature not to kick the can down the road, particularly need funding. A third one is that operation and maintenance. And I get people who they think operation and maintenance takes care of itself, that we have an automatic budget. We know we have JPAC that deals a lot with projects, but most people don't realize that, what is it, 3% or 5% of the budget goes to operation and maintenance. And as you mentioned, we have staff problems. So, and then the only other thing that I try and mention to them is that you have the 3 task force. Then I think that's a project task force, a transit and multimodal task force, and I forget what the third one is. So my question is, what am I missing? What else should I be stressing?
Well, I think you're doing pretty well.
Uh-huh.
I think that I don't even know where this came from. Now I'm showing that in the last 3 days, I've probably heard the same person say the same thing. But it was the one that was talking about how much do you really spend on the service of transportation anywhere and anyhow. And somebody, I think it was at the Tualatin golf
Director
course,
Strickler at
right? Wasn't
Tualatin,
that where it
yeah.
was? And basically they say that they think they pay $2,000 or $3,000 a year
That's right.
on what they pay for being part of the system and driving their car or getting to do what they want to do with transportation options. And that the reality is that they give about $200 to $300.
No.
And so it really, a lot of the general public do not understand how they pay or when they pay for the transportation system. They just know that they have taxes and they have fees and they're assuming they're paying a lot. And so it's really important for us to really talk about the system cost and what each individual is actually paying. Because somebody said, well, gosh, if I'm only paying $200 or $300, I'd be willing to pay more than $1,000 or over $1,500 or whatever. Well, that's what we need to hear. We need to hear that they're willing to pay. And then we also need to hear how. How do you want to pay? And that's the dialogue we've been trying to have on this tour. We don't let them out of the room until they tell us not only what are some of the tools, but what will you support?
Right. That's important.
Yep. So that's what I hope you
And
dialogue with them.
I don't know if you saw this. This was Statesman Journal 4 days ago. A section of the concrete guardrail on a bridge on Highway 101 collapsed. And they now have to have the side of the bridge where the collapse occurred is closed. They only have 1 lane that they can use. We saw a similar thing down in Coos Bay where they have a long-term situation where, again, one side of the bridge collapsed. We're starting to see more and more of those sorts of things. And so this, when I heard this particular one, it's just like, it's another sad example of where we are.
Yeah, the way I always think of it is transportation is a utility.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
people don't see it like they don't see the provision of electricity or water or sewer, but yet when we talk about the rates that people pay on those utilities, the maintenance is the first priority. The rates have to cover the maintenance of the existing system. And then the growth of the system is beyond that. And that's the conversation about how that's regulated. How do you grow? When do you grow? What fuels are you using? Blah, 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 right? And we don't really have that situation with transportation. It's literally a political football for you guys to pass between defend and try and tackle everybody, maybe herd them. But it's a major lift, and it's more exciting to talk about the new project and put that first than it is to put the maintenance and operations. And I will agree with you. I mean, whether it's been ODOT or in other states where I've worked, it's the operations and maintenance folks who are there with an emergency. They know their community. These are their family members. They care. It's a very deep thing. And they need all the resources that they can get because it's a safety issue, not just for the traveling public, but for themselves. I recall an incident in 1999 when we were considering the transportation package then, when the tunnel on 26 actually fell in on some of the maintenance workers. These are real problems, and you're pointing out real issues. And if we treated this as a utility, we would have more intense conversations about this, and you're forcing that conversation. So I just want to say thank you for forcing the conversation on behalf of everybody who's using the system, but also for the workers that do such a great job every day. So thank you.
Yeah, and we need to do more for their safety. I'm hoping that we can actually get a bill that allows for photo radar in work zones so that we can start to rein in some of the bad driving behavior. It's very much like the school bus cameras on the school bus arm. When they stop, we'll now actually be able to see some of the people that are actually violating that stop. So
That would be great.
Those are things that we really, I think, need to do.
When I came home to my husband and said I'd be going out on my first construction project, he looked at me and said, "So we're going to need life insurance." That's where, that's where his head went.
But it's
Right? I
true.
was excited to go out and actually build some stuff. And he was like, "So you're going to be doing construction at night on the highway." Okay.
Right.
So it's not a conversation you want to have.
The other thing that I'm working on has to do with a lot of rail bills that you and I have talked some about, and we have some other things that'll come along too, which is in addition to dealing with the highway fund, because you can't use the highway fund for rail. So that's out there as well.
Yeah. Councilor Gonzalez and then Lewis.
Thanks, President Peterson. First and foremost, with the football metaphors, like I can tell football season's back, so that's great.
I am not good
I was
at
like
football
political
metaphor,
football,
but-
all right? Like, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
but it
Just
is a
make sure you
political-
don't fumble. There you go.
On
the 1 yard
Our
line.
president just said.
That's the extent of my football knowledge. I'm more of a football kind of guy. I want to acknowledge, well, this has been a wonderful conversation on O&M and personnel. Kind of pivoting slightly differently, I also want to acknowledge one of the cornerstones of both of your leadership in this package is you've been asking state leaders and local leaders to think bigger around a programmatic vision and really looking at how we can create a more statewide approach. And a lot of kudos. One of the personal editorial notes that I want to add is I think it's also really important for us to not leave money on the table, especially when it comes to this. And you know this, the federal opportunities, the programs that we can apply to and match for. Right. And Portland metro area, like many other places in the state, have a significant number of opportunities that we're working on being stewards of to the best of our ability. And so, to angle it back to the program approach, as the session goes, and this is a question, how we as regional leaders can engage with leaders across the state to fund these programmatic buckets to the level that support some of these major opportunities that we have for competitive match, one-to-one, et cetera.
So two things. Number one, we've heard match as a possibility of a tool throughout the last couple of years, but definitely it's been mentioned on the tour. And so matches and having that kind of a pot is something that I seriously believe is on the table. Number two, I think quite frankly, the state of Oregon and Metro have both been really good partners with the rest of the jurisdictions in the state of Oregon, trying to help them get some of those federal dollars for a wide variety of things. We've had some safety successes. We've had some bridge successes. We've had some successes with, well, we've got people with EV. We just got a $15 million,
Yeah.
you know, EV recharging, you know, with all of the jurisdictions. And I know that Metro helps with all of that. You know, they're the planning organization, and they depend on you and your data and your staff. And so I think that both, also the state put on 2 years ago, we put on an extra person. We housed them in ODOT, but it was for grants that were for EVs and, you know, for clean energy and not just ODOT type projects. And so we put that extra person on water. We even got out of the ODOT, we got some water grant money. So, I mean, I think we're doing our best, trying to be good leaders, trying to be good models, trying to help with staff, trying to put on staff in our budgets that can help write for those grants, and then trying to partner. For gosh sakes,
Yeah.
look at TV Highway, you know, and look at some of the grants that we've gotten from that because you helped out. So, I mean, it's all of us being good partners, and it's all of us being at the top of our game. You know, we helped with Hood River. That bridge, I won't go over it again, and I scolded my daughter for going over it the last time she was up there. But I said, you know, that bridge has got to get fixed. We gave them some money from the state. Washington State's given them money. So we're trying to work in a bi-state way. We said, which ones will you give money to? We talked to them, and, you know, we all said Hood River, Hood River, Hood River. So it's one of those things, again, where you ask the good question, but I think we've started.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I just want to reflect that the big, hard conversation is future and new revenue sources. And obviously you're going through this stage where you're putting it all on the table, you know, like here's all of the different things we could contemplate. And folks in extreme positions are going to say, you're going to do all of those things, or you're going to tax me 120 times. You're going to, you know, make it so it's impossible for me to do business in the state. And I just want to be really clear. You got to put it all out on the table in order for you to pick the one or the two. And in this case, we're going to pick the couple that are then going to take the place eventually of gas tax. So you add one and you subtract one, or you add two and you subtract one. So I just want to say that out loud for the record in order to help dispel the myth that we're just doing everything. And some of this is about phasing one out as it's naturally dying, let it die, and then bringing the future forward. But as we do that, one of the things that I think is going to come up is the cost of collection, because tolling obviously showed us it's a high cost of collection, particularly when it is not spread across a number of projects. And it was demonstrated to be unbearable when it was just one specific tolling project of the 205 Abernathy. So thinking through the cost of collection challenge, your biggest challenge is that gas tax is the easiest to administer. Of all of the transportation sources, it is so easy because you only have so many gas stations. The computer is already doing the work. You've already swiped a card. You don't have to see a person. On the extreme opposite end of that is DMV, where you actually have to like take somebody's blood sample practically to be like, who are you? And it's very labor intensive. So I think we hope to land somewhere in the middle, but you're going to be burdened by those two things.
Yeah.
That the two things that quote unquote work right now are outliers. So I think we just all have to be comfortable having the conversation that the cost of collection and starting something up is going to take time and it's going to take resources. And those resources need to be dedicated in a way where it's not burdened on whoever's piloting or whoever's first out of the gate. Something we've learned. So I just want to say that out loud. And if you want to respond, thank you.
Do I want to respond? Well, basically what you are talking about are really best practices for budgeting. Okay. And so I'm a budgeteer and I really believe in those good practices. And one other filter that I would add to yours, Christine, would be basically the filter of, is it a short-term goal? And are we chasing dimes and nickels in the cushions? Or is it actually a really good, version of a gas tax. Not only is it good administration, lower costs, easy to collect, but also is it sufficient? So we've got to have, administrative has to be under control. We've got to have the sufficiency element, and we've also got to see if it's something we can turn around quickly or it's going to take us a while. So it's not just easier to collect, but it's also how long does it take to set it up? So all good thoughts, and I'm with you.
The other thing to remember too is that 25 is the beginning of a new way of doing things. And so we will be doing a transition. People shouldn't expect that, once a bill comes out in 25, okay, it's fixed. It's gonna take time, and transitions like away from the gas tax to something else will definitely be a process for sure.
Well, we can turn it over to Annalisa, but I'll just add for the last decade plus, I've just said we were the first to have a gas tax, and we should be the first to not have a gas tax.
That's right. That's right.
So thank you for leading us through that firstism. I appreciate that. Annalisa, anything to add and round out this conversation?
I don't think so. No, just thank you, counselors, for today's discussion and for welcoming our honored guests. And no, I think that's really it for now.
Okay, well, thank you so much again for all
Madam President?
Oh, from above, Counselor Nolan had a question.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Thank you to our guests from the legislature. I want to follow up a little on the conversation that Counselor Lewis started with you. You've both indicated some consensus evolving around what needs to be done for the transportation system, although at the moment it's in pretty broad categories and not specific activities. I would be interested if you'd be willing to weigh in on what consensus you are finding in your listening tour around the mechanism for raising funds that would become this transition. Which ones are you finding to be most acceptable, maybe even desirable among the Oregonians you have heard from?
You want me to?
Yeah, good.
Thank you, Counselor Nolan. So anyway, first of all, there are some difference of opinions on maybe what is the first one we should do.
Right.
And a lot of times we've heard in different places, but in the Portland area from our congressional delegate, that maybe we should start with a user fee. And why can't we just roll it out right now? And the user fee is really, as we are starting to see, is more of a midterm tool versus a short-term tool. We could not turn it around and apply it in 25, and we need it in 25. So another example of something that's shown up on the list in the tour has been indexing the gas tax. And that is something that we can turn around. It's not necessarily not controversial, but at least it's something everybody's saying, I want to look at that some more. I really want to look at that. Another example besides the user fee and the gas tax indexing has been one that we brought from another state. And we've had groups like Street Trust and others bring in speakers that we suggested. And one of them was from Minnesota, and they passed what we call a delivery fee. Now, we would have to call it a convenience fee, so we could use it for more types of things because of the highway fund. But it's a convenience fee that somebody would pay if you were having people deliver something to your house. Then you would have to pay 50 cents on every $100 delivery. Now, the companies in Minnesota weren't upset about it because Minnesota then took those fees and they applied them to maintenance specifically. So it was tied to something that anyone who has a delivery business cares about the roads. And so they were happy to see that fee go to the maintenance and preservation of the roads. So that's just a flavor, Mary, but I just, there's a lot of different people with different ideas. Some of them said, go ahead, just increase the DMV. And we said, well, the DMV is not going to give us much money because those fees don't even cover the services. So if we're going to raise the fees in DMV, we want it to cover the service first. So there's a lot of work to do, but we've got folks answering questions. We're going to have a 3.5-hour meeting. We hope you watch in September during Ledge Days, and you'll get some answers to questions from May when we ask about some of these different tools. And you'll get a chance to hear about the resource library that's coming to our work groups so that they have some of this good information when they start their conversation between October and January.
The other thing to remember about the state of Oregon is we're a large state, and once you get out of the Willamette Valley, people's opinions seem to change. And one of the things that we've heard more support of in the more rural sections of the state is tolling. But if you bring tolling up, as you probably saw in Portland Metro, that is a very, very unpopular, to put it mildly, unpopular approach. So there are some approaches that some people think, oh, it's absolutely do that. But it doesn't. We're going to have to sort out a lot of things. And that's one of them. The other thing to remember is it's not off the table. The governor just stepped back from it for now. So we shall see.
I always like to think of the immense size of our state and the immense number of lane miles.
Yes.
But our population is actually very small and our burden is very high. And this is a very difficult conversation. So I appreciate you both leaning into it. So with that, Councilor Rosenthal, did you have a question or can we close this out?
Well, I just really had a comment because it's a conversation that I had with Representative McLean, and I want to support what Councilor Lewis said, is people, and it goes back to the tolling proposal for the Abernathy and 205. A lot of people didn't understand it. So I think that probably the education issue is what you talked about, identifying for people that this is not just taxing for the sake of taxing, for generating large scale, that there are criteria. And you mentioned some of them, such as equity, such as reliability, such as short-term or long-term, such as low cost, as Councilor Lewin mentioned. It can't be a high cost to collect with very little benefit for the people. So the education on, and I agree with you, that the education on what are the goals, and that these are Oregon-centric goals, not just ODOT-centric goals.
Right.
Making that point is going to be very critical moving forward, I think. But I think you're trying to do it, and there's more work to be done.
The other problem, Councilor Rosenthal, I think, was that ODOT was far too geographically specific.
Yes.
Right? And they were doing some work, like on 217 and other places, and not talking about tolling, and then doing other work and talking about tolling. And I think, if you talk to the Oregon City folks, it's like, well, why us? You're not doing it to Beaverton.
Right.
So there was a problem, I think, too, with the kind of logic of rolling things out, which didn't help.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming in. And thank you for the open lines of communication. And like we said, the wearing out the soles of your shoes on our behalf for the entire state. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Yeah. Yep. Have a great day.
And thank you so much.
We're done.
Thanks for
Okay.
coming.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to renewing our regional vision scoping feedback. Our former Metro Councilor McLean would probably love to sit in on this one as well, but having gone through 2040 herself. Our last work session today is another opportunity to shape our ongoing efforts to update Metro's future vision, which is required by charter. The vision today that we are working with is the 2040 growth concept. And the question on the table is, how do we move forward? And staff can start to come up. Don't be shy. Thanks. Specifically, our charter calls for the appointment of a future vision commission to draft and recommend a future vision to Metro Council. We were going to start this work prior to the pandemic, but we all agreed that probably during a pandemic where we didn't know where we were getting a mask or toilet paper in the next hour is probably not a good idea to start a conversation about a 50-year vision for the region. So I think we're all pleased that we are here today in this moment, past the pandemic, and in a place where I think the region is actually aching for a future vision. How do we move beyond the experiences that we've had in the most recent past? How do we build on the success that we have? And what did we say we wanted to do, but we haven't been able to accomplish yet? And what other things are out there that we haven't been able to include in that 50-year vision that we probably should now? So I'll turn it over to Malou Wilkinson, our Metro Planning Development and Research Deputy Director, and staff to start a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson and Metro councilors. We're really excited to be back here today to talk about the renewal of our region's future vision. There's not actually much to say after everything that President Peterson just said, but again, I'm Malou Wilkinson. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research, and I use she, her pronouns. And we're really excited to be back here today to continue talking about how we move this renewal of our vision forward. On July 30th, we were here where we received some great general direction from you on key elements of our work scope. Since then, we've been meeting with all of you to hear your thoughts regarding the charter required Future Vision Commission. And today we're really looking for your guidance on how to support the council appointment of a Future Vision Commission to renew the future vision for the next 50 years and present that to the Metro Council. We're also hoping to learn a little bit more from you regarding the ancillary outcomes that you're hoping to achieve through this process. And that will help us inform the development of the public engagement plan. And actually, Georgia, if you could move to the next slide. I'm sorry, I forgot. Thank you. And now you can move to the next one, because I'm going to turn it over to Jess Zadeb, who is our project manager. So we have Jess here from the investment areas team, and we have Molly Kuhner-Mesker, who is our interim communications director and planning, development, and research, here with me today.
All right, great. Thanks, Malou. As she noted, Jess Zadeb, I'm a principal regional planner here at Metro. Thanks for having us back. It's been enlightening to have conversations with each of you counselors in the last couple of weeks about the Future Vision Commission. So what we're going to be presenting to you today really reflects back to you all a compiled proposal based upon conversations that we've had with all of you, including Councilor Simpson, who we did get a chance to talk with today. Or we did get a chance to talk with, but isn't present today. So we're really excited about the opportunity this commission presents for us to bring together a group of forward-looking folks to help guide this vision. It's a one-time commission. Just reminding everyone that that's a body that will exist for the time period of preparing this work for us. If you could go to the next slide. As Malou mentioned, the charter instructs us to create this body. It will be appointed by council, and they will develop and recommend directly to you all the draft future vision. This is a body that has that direct line. We know that there are other bodies that exist at Metro already that will have a role in this process, and they will continue to play that direct advisory role to you all as well. Bodies like MPAC, like CORE. And so they will be continuing to have that direct advisory line to you, and the Future Vision Commission will also be a direct line to you all as council. The charter is pretty thin on the membership requirements, public and private sectors, someone from the academic community, and at least one member from outside the metro area. And as we've said to you all, that can mean Vancouver, Palo Alto, or Paris. So we will figure out what that means.
The best practices trip.
To Paris.
Yeah.
included. No.
It's on my mind. I'm headed there in about a week and a half.
What?
I'm
Best
really-
practice research.
It is, well, I am looking forward to seeing all of their bike infrastructure and greening that they've done in the last couple years. Their mayor has a real vision for what she wants to see out of that city. So it's not an idle thought. It is vacation. There's a little piece of work brain in there too. Next slide, please. So the commission has only existed once before in Metro's history. And since you all asked about this every single meeting, we decided to just put the names on there this time.
It's true.
You will note, yes, as Council President Peterson mentioned, the Metro representative on this body was Susan McLean, who was just here in her current capacity. You'll note that there were 3 government representatives here, 3 elected officials from across the region, that being Councilor McLean, the chair of the Clark County board, and then also the mayor of Lake Oswego at that time. Some of these folks are still around in the region and are actors doing similar work to what they did 30 years ago. Some of them have passed on. Some of them have handed their farms to their children. So there are some through lines that we could have here. I do want to note the person who was from outside the region is that listed gentleman there, Robert Texter, futures anthropologist. He was an academic who was the originator really of this idea of ethnographic futures research, which is a methodology that sort of pairs the ideas of anthropology and interviewing people with presenting futures that we don't know what they're going to look like. And that's a line of thinking that I think we'll want to be exploring for this project, talking to people about what they envision for the future in 50 years and just leaving it as an open-ended question is not necessarily the best process to getting them to think about it. Often people do better when they're reacting to something that is a possible future. We didn't know 30 years ago that we would have a pandemic that would drastically change our lives, but we can look ahead to see that there are things that are unknowns. And so that expertise about futures thinking, I think, is something that we'll want to be considering for this project too. But you can also look at this list and see a little bit about maybe who wasn't here at the table. Next slide. The commission, as we said, will recommend the future vision to council. The 1995 commission wrote a report. Not sure whether they actually wrote it or staff wrote it, a little unclear. But the council eventually adopted a portion of that report as the actual future vision and accepted the report itself in their resolution. That group will consider relevant information. We will provide them with research, and then they're also empowered to ask us to do more research and give them background. We envision them meeting in person for 18 months, starting this January, hopefully. Next slide. So to get into the proposal that is, as I said, a compilation of what we heard from you all, we really want to make sure this group is a workable size and around that number of members, kind of pending tribal participation. We'll talk about that in a minute. We heard really clearly from you that we need a broad representation of interests. And we also heard that it's super important to have people on this group who are collaborators and not necessarily everyone who's bringing the same perspective. I am struggling to remember the phrase that you used, Councilor Wong, but it was really spot on. I'm not going to remember, but basically we don't want, we don't need groupthink in this group. We want folks who are coming from different perspectives. So that's the start of what we want to see in this group. Next slide. Composition wise, in terms of the seats, we really do think that having elected officials here is important so that the elected members in our partner organizations don't feel like this is a plan that is being done to them, that they have a voice here. Shout out to Councilor Simpson for the idea of having 2 members per council district to help with our geographic spread across the region. We'll have 1 member from outside the greater Portland area. We are planning to invite tribes participation and provide them with a description of what the commission's charge is and what the member characteristics are that we're seeking that Molly will talk about. We hope that tribes will let Metro know whether they want to participate in the commission or if they'll participate through other means in this process. And we understand that they may have a different process to select an individual to participate in this group on their behalf. And we recommend that Metro allows for some flexibility in timing for those appointments so that we can allow the tribe's processes to take place. And those recommendations are what we've come to in consultation with Metro's Tribal Affairs staff. And last, we do plan to have a seat for a Metro counselor on this body as well. Next slide. This is the laundry list of interests that we are going to try very hard to have represented in this group. We heard a lot from you about who needs to be at the table. I also want to harken back to the fact that we want to keep this a workable size. With a list of this length, we know that that means that people are going to need to wear multiple hats. All of us wear multiple hats in our own lives. We are parents, we are Metro counselors, we are advocates for something that we just care deeply about. And so we're going to ask people to bring their whole selves to this table. And that may mean that you have someone who is both young and a housing advocate, and that they're wearing both of those hats. So it's going to be a challenge, I'll acknowledge that. I do want to call out youth and the importance that all of you have placed on making sure that we have a strong youth voice in this process, because we're talking 50 years down the line. I also want to call out Native communities listed here, because this is really representing the urban Indigenous community members across Greater Portland who are descended from many recognized tribes throughout the country. And those urban Indigenous members of our community may not feel like they're represented by the tribal representatives on this commission. I'm going to turn it over to Molly to talk a little bit more about the process, but just one last point. We don't have listed on here historically marginalized folks in our region or BIPOC folks called out specifically, because I think that we got the sense from you all that we really want to cover that as well in the characteristics of folks who we're looking forward to represent on this commission. Everyone really should have those communities in mind as they bring their views to this process. And we've heard strongly from you that equity is a top of mind consideration for this process. Obviously, everything we do at Metro, but perhaps it's an oversight to not have a bullet on the slide to state that. But I just wanted to make that clear that that's what we've heard from you as well.
Hi, counselors. Molly Cooney-Mesker, she, her pronouns. I'm interim community, communications and engagement manager in planning, development, and research. So as Jess spoke to, we talked to all of you about this commission, received your ideas, and that included talking through a bit about an application process that will help to bring together a commission that meets a lot of these needs that Jess has been discussing. And keeping that sort of January as the first meeting deadline in mind. Oh, Georgia, next slide, please, sorry. In our sites, these are some of the details of the application process that we heard pretty consistently from all of you, and there seems to be agreement on. There are still more details to work through, but we really heard we want a public call for applications. We're looking at a 1-month window in September and early October, again, to work towards that January deadline. An online application brief that doesn't require, doesn't make too much of a burden for folks to apply, but that we do want to receive some information from people. And we're intending to offer both written and video formats for those applications. That will be looking for an application review around mid-October after we close that application window, and that we're working towards council appointing the Future Vision Commission on November 21st. So we're really working within that timeline, and we think we can get there. So Jess alluded to this, but again, we heard from you that we really want to see in a commission whose members represent a diversity of experiences across the region. And these are some of the specifics that we heard from you. So looking at people who represent various stages of life, various ways they get around the region, housing tenure, whether they're renters or owners, their income, their ability, their racial identity, their gender identity, and looking to commissioners who again can bring all of their identities to this commission to help bring the various perspectives that our diverse region has. And we also heard from you a bit about the types of thinkers, the types of approach that we want at this table. People who are collaborative, who are thinking about interconnected systems and how they impact each other, and that we are bringing new voices to this table also. Next slide, please. Engagement will really be a key component of our work plan. This commission is one piece of engagement, an important one, but engagement with the public, interested parties, jurisdictional partners is also very important. And in conversations with you, we started having ideas about what this engagement can look like. One consistent idea that we heard again is that the importance of youth representation and really focused engagement and deep engagement with youth, and beyond youth who are already involved, but to youth who are not already involved in civic processes, to educate, to bring them in and hear their voices in this process. We'll continue to discuss specific engagement outcomes. Next slide, Georgia, please. But we know our strategies will, at the very least, be designed to achieve the outcomes in Metro's public engagement guide, which this council recently adopted, and that these are really foundational to our engagement approach. So I think sort of looking at these as guide for guidance and a foundation as we start to get a little bit more specific and flesh out what our engagement strategies look like is definitely forefront for us. And then we also want to hear from you after this presentation, which is almost over, a little bit more about, are there outcomes beyond these, outcomes that these don't speak to, that you would also like to see the engagement in this process achieve? And we've started talking about some of these with you too, but we want to circle back to that because that will really help us scope some of the specifics, the strategies and the tactics in the engagement for the future vision.
Next slide, please, Georgia. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. As you can see on this graphic, we were last here in July, we're here in September right now. We're going to be back in October looking for your direction on a draft work plan and the engagement strategy. And this is really important for us as we're thinking through what this effort looks like over the next couple of years. And then assuming that our timeline holds, we will be bringing to you in November for your consideration a resolution that would approve the work plan and appoint the Future Vision Commission members. And then that bottom right council work session discussion. I mean, we anticipate your guidance throughout this process. And so it doesn't need to be every month, but there will be a number of important times that we will be looking for your guidance throughout this effort. Next slide, please. So we have a couple of questions that we had asked in the work session worksheet, and we just like to put them back up. The first one is really focused on, do you support this approach for identifying and appointing a Future Vision Commission and the way that we described it today? And I want to say again that what we've attempted to do is put together what we heard from all of you, but that doesn't mean that we heard different things from some of you. And so we're looking forward to your discussion. This is a draft approach, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say so that we can put together something that really meets the needs of the council. And so that is the main thing that we want to hear from you today. If we have time, we're really interested in the second question, which is about, in addition to, as an outcome of this process, having an updated future vision and growth concept, are there other outcomes that you're hoping that this process can achieve? And that really helps us scope our work as well. So with that, President Peterson concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Before I open up for questions from the council, process-wise, yes, the charter says you need a Future Visions Committee. Why? We didn't go back. I mean, maybe I missed that because I had to run for a second, but what does that feed into? And what does it result in?
President Peterson, we can talk about what the charter says, and we can also talk about how Metro applied it in the last time.
Yes, thank you.
And then Carrie, if we get anything wrong, you can correct us from a legal perspective. The charter says that that Metro shall have a future vision, and that is to be recommended to the Metro Council by this Future Vision Commission.
Recommended for what?
To guide Metro's work, but I'm not sure I'm getting the words right.
Well, I think, I don't think it's a purely legal answer, but if I may, I'll just interject. So Carrie McLaren, Metro Attorney. The charter really kind of spells out what it's not as much as what it is. And I think that is maybe a little bit of what staff is talking about here. So it says it's not a regulatory document. And it's the intent of the charter that the future vision have no effect that would allow a court or agency to review it. So it really is intended, I think, to be something that is, now I'm just reading the plain text. I have not gone back and done any legislative research, and perhaps if necessary, I can call Roger Alfred up, to do so. But if I just read those from a plain text perspective, it really is to say, we're setting a vision. And it becomes if you want to, North Star or something to look at as you begin to think of your other planning actions.
In terms of a 50-year plan, right? And an update of a 50-year plan, which then can result in actual regulatory changes to the system. That's what I was trying to get at. I didn't want to get into a charter debate. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But my point being is that there is a flow of work here, and this is the first of the flow of work to update the 2040 growth concept and have any agreed upon regionally changes to what's going on in the land use, transportation, parks. I mean, whatever it is that everybody wants us to look at and has agreement. And it's not just about the authority, but the collaboration of that workspace. So that's what I just wanted to get at first, is I wanted to put it into context that this is a recommendation to a vision, but it may not be complete, and it may have questions it doesn't answer, and it may put other questions in front of us as we move forward. And I guess to that point, we don't have a charge statement to this committee yet. So I think that's probably an important part of our expectations of what the outcomes would be. And I guess I don't really want to spend a lot of time on outcomes, because I think you need to get an agreement on seating a committee. But I also think the most important part of seating the committee is the charge.
Yes.
So,
Go ahead. If I might, my intent is that we are developing a vision, which is a non-regulatory 50-year document. Alongside that, we are also developing an implementation plan that makes clear what the steps are that we can know at the end of the visioning process that we need to take.
Mhm.
Yes, update the growth concept. There are a lot of other pieces of the framework plan that are stale, that could do with updating. We know that we hear from partners around the region that there are challenging pieces of the urban growth management functional plan that they need to work with. And there are some questions in there about how different pieces of Metro work with one another. And so my intent is that implementation plan begins to spell out what all of those next steps are. We know some of them now, and the process of developing the vision will help unearth what the other implementation steps are, whether those are things that Metro already does and has purview over, or whether you all come up with something else that you want to see us dive into as a regional body because you feel like it needs collaboration. So that's the intent from a deliverables perspective, vision and implementation plan that gets at exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, I just want to set expectations on the committee with the charge statement. So
Yep.
I think at some point we just have to come back with an agreement on that. And the only comment I'll make quick, and I'll get to Councilor Nolan, is I hadn't seen the number of representatives that we could possibly have from the tribes. I'd say that now is disproportionately weighing. I think that we need to really think about how many other elected officials are on the committee. If we end up with all seven participating, which I would hope we could have, it would be great. But it's disproportionately affecting the makeup of the committee now. So I would just say put some time and energy into rethinking the makeup.
May I?
Mhm.
I appreciate that, President Peterson. I think the more that we've talked about this with more of you, and we realized that we did not include we don't believe that we included participation from our tribal government partners in the first future vision. And so whether they're interested in participating on the commission or there is another way, we feel like it's of utmost importance that they're involved in some way. And so we agree that that's something that we need to think about and explore.
Yeah, and if it turns out that they all do, and I would strongly encourage them to participate on the committee, then we need to rethink additional members. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Madam President. From what we heard at the initial briefing and again reiterated this morning, we're about to invest a fair amount of financial and human resources in this effort. So to your point, Madam Chair, about what the purpose of it is, I would encourage that we counsel among ourselves, be really clear what we will use their output for. Because if it's just ticking a box in our charter, we could do that with a couple of meetings and a few placards of gratitude for their service. But I don't think that's what we're looking for. So how we find the balance between specific enough to be actionable, but not so detailed that it becomes obsolete within 3 years because the world has changed. It's worth our spending time as a governing body to really work through how we will use it over the next 4 years that many of us will be here and perhaps longer for other folks.
And by use it, you mean the outcomes of the recommendations of the
recommendation that they give us and we adopt in whole or in part. Let's figure out what we want it to do before we decide what it should contain.
Yep, thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson, and thank you so much to staff. This is obviously such a huge body of work that I think we've been waiting to dive into. So I'm going to try and keep my feedback really pointed, recognizing that we're going to have a lot more opportunities to talk and chat. And there's so many things to talk about. It's like, for the next 50 years, and of course for the last 3 decades of this plan since it's come into inception. Just answering the first question on supporting the recommendation for the future commission and vision. The first item is that I really like the geographic equity clause or component that we discussed at one of our planning meetings. The question that I had then is a question that I still have now is, how are we going to determine, is it someone that lives in the district? Is it someone that works there? Is there someone that has some kind of deep connection? I think that's always the thing that I would appreciate if we could offer clarity to applicants ahead of time about where that prioritization is. If I had to put my weight on the scale, I would say that the living in an area is probably the deepest connection that you have. And but I know people are highly mobile and move from different parts of the region at different phases of their life. So I just think that's a deeper question that I want us to dive into. And I would love to learn more about, one, what the council thinks, and two, what the staff thinks on that. Second is with regards to the commission, and I was able to chat with you about this, but I want to elevate what I see as a policy question and removing barriers to participation. what we learned from the charter document is that this commission cannot legally be compensated. So that is like a, that's obviously in black and white. But I do think that it's going to be really important for us to remove barriers to participation, especially for a commission that we want to reflect the different experiences, the different economic conditions, the different, distances that they live from MRC. So childcare. I would love to see, things that don't count as compensation, like reimbursements for travel, obviously food and things like that. So if we really want this committee to reflect not only where we've been and where we are, but where we want to be, a really clear plan on that. Third is an approach to skill building, educating, and empowering candidates to hopefully feel like they don't need to know the last 3 decades of urban growth policy. And I think a lot of that comes down to what we're going to be doing as an organization to evaluate like what we feel have been the biggest successes and takeaways from the 95 plan. And again, we've talked about that, but just want to share it on the record, all the things around quality of life or our town centers, like Orenco Station and Rockwood, like areas that we've been, tremendously successful, in other areas where we maybe have missed the mark. And then lastly, I appreciated seeing the different criteria that we want to try and target in terms of kind of representation and indicators, being intentional. I feel like some of the largest gaps in terms of commission representation in the 95 plan was communities of color and equity. I think we can all acknowledge that that was a glaring gap, and in general, the plan not really talking about equity and how our region might evolve and should evolve to create a great place. And secondly, I think economic development was a huge gap as well, in terms of how we talk about how our region not just wants to create great places in terms of the built environment, but also what kind of industry do we want here? How do we want to align our research and our government to create high quality jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of like prosperity element. I know we had some like real estate interests, maybe some financier interests. That doesn't necessarily relate to an economic development strategy and the kind of like industries that we want to be a part of the next 40, 50 years, or where we want to make some bets as a region. So anyway, I'll keep it at that because there's so many more things that we can talk about, but related to number 1 in particular, that's the feedback I wanted to give, and look forward to the dialogue. Thank you.
Great, thank you. A lot to think about. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, a comment, and then I have 3 specific questions, but a comment is, it goes without saying that what you get out of this is going to depend on who's on it. And there's about an infinite way to slice and dice the specific membership of the committee, and you're going to get different results depending on the interactions. They're going to have a lot of personal interactions and a lot of personal perspectives. So although I agree with Councilor Nolan that we should be very clear on what we sort of want out of them, to some extent, we don't know what they're going to try and create until they get together and start doing it. And so we won't really know the end use until we see sort of what their tendency is. It could be a very strong personality that leads them to a certain conclusion. So we're doing something for which we really don't know what the outcome is going to be. My specific questions are, first of all, what do we mean by lived experience? And I'm just going to use an odd example. For example, is it a better lived experience for a vision creating process to have somebody who's born and raised in the area, has lived here all their lives? Or is it better lived experience to have somebody who has lived in 5 or 6 cities around the world? Which one is more useful? Maybe they're both useful, but maybe you can't have both. A second question would be, and this echoes a little bit of what President Peterson said, I can identify 3 or 4 different interest groups among the tribes. I'm not, but I'm unclear as to why we chose 7 as opposed to 4 or 5 or 3. I don't, there might be some rationale that I'm not aware of, but I think it'd be worth looking at. And then one is leading beyond that. For example, I noticed in the previous commission, we didn't have, for example, the Port of Portland represented, or for example, TriMet. The port is our window to the world in many regards, both shipping as well as air transport. So if we don't have a representative of a group like that, how do we communicate with them after we create the vision or before we send the vision to the Metro Council? How do we communicate with these other somewhat very important stakeholders that may be interested and get their feedback? And that's sort of in addition to the commission vision issue. So those are my 3 questions. And we can take them off later.
May I answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, President Peterson, Councilor Rosenthal. I think you answered your own question with a lived experience. There's not a better. I think what we put up there was a variety, and it's really important to have those different perspectives. So we're not judging one over another. And I am not an expert in tribal relations, but my understanding is that they are a sovereign nation, and we're not going to choose to ask any one specific. If we're going to ask any, we need to ask them all, and we'll see who wants to participate.
There are 7 federally recognized tribes that we work with in the region, so that's why the number is 7.
Okay.
Yeah, very specifically that have political and cultural connection within our metro district boundary.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis. So that's why 7. And then your last question about entities like Port of Portland and TriMet. We will be, when we come back to you in October, we're going to have a work plan and a public engagement plan. And part of that will show how all of the different ways that we will engage different bodies. MPAC is one body that will be engaged in some way throughout this process. They are, and that is a place where Port of Portland and TriMet are. We need those types of voices as well, but whether or not they're some of the applicants on the commission, and should the council choose, be looking for that, I think that's, as one of the members of the commission, I think that's up for discussion right now. But we absolutely need to engage other government partners beyond we have many, and they all need to be given an opportunity to provide some feedback along the way.
So MPAC would have a defined role in this?
MPAC will absolutely have an opportunity to talk. What we don't want to do is confuse roles, because the Future Vision Commission is the commission that is recommending the vision to the Metro Council. So we are still working on developing a chart that's going to really make it so easy for everyone to understand. We don't have it yet. We're going to bring that to you in October, and we'll talk about it more. But MPAC will be talking about this work along the way. But the Future Vision Commission is absolutely the one recommending to Metro Council.
Do you think you could bring a draft mission statement at the same time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so what we have in the charter is kind of a clear role. And so we'll start with that and we can move forward.
Because I think what I'm hearing, it's a combination of, here's what the charter says. Here are the knowns and the unknowns that we're asking you to look into.
Yep. Absolutely.
Anyway, and what it'll fit into, what it needs to be recommending towards, right? That there needs to be that, this isn't just going out into the ether, it's going towards something. So, Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I think this has been a good conversation to kind of dig in on how immense the task is and the difference between where we are with scoping versus actually doing. And scoping is definitely a period in which we're going to have to be comfortable with a whole lot more unanswered questions than answers. My hope would be that we are, in addition to all of the various attributes of people's lives that we're going to try and keep in balance, that we also have those attributes of cooperative and all of that you had listed. But I would add to that productive contrarian, because we at Metro do a really nice job of finding people who align with regionalism and who align with many of the values that we share. And there are many folks who are still quite productive in our space of finding solutions that work for our communities, who are a little contrarian to some of the Metro ways. And I believe that if we're going to have a strong end product, we need them to be part of the process. So how to put that balance on top of all the other things we're trying to find balance, good luck. But I'll definitely be thinking through in my district who might kind of thread that needle of still being productive, but can always see other sides of issues. Additionally, I guess I have a little bit of a concern with a Metro councilor sitting on this body, because we are so limited in number of people that can productively carry on a conversation. And I think that brings us a little bit back into the liaison type role. And this is such a big body of work that we need all of us to be tracking it at some level. MPAC will obviously have the MPAC counselors deeply involved. So there's, I think, potentially a new model for how council engages that I would like to see explored in potentially allowing more seats to be for community members and for our local government officials. We hear from ourselves a lot. So I might be in the minority on that. That's just my opinion, that we don't need a seat for a counselor. And then finally, when it comes to, I want to put this, when it comes to bringing folks with credential or that academic lens, yes, the charter says we have to have somebody from academia. I don't want that to fall on only one person, but I also don't want us to be full of people with credentials. So I think that gets back to this lived experience question, where the people who are experiencing transit being of difficulty in their lives can speak to transit, and then we can go side huddle with TriMet, and that doesn't have to happen at the table. So very curious how you're going to ask about those lived experience kind of priorities in the application process, because I think everybody has a lived experience with transportation. Everybody has a lived experience with land use, but let's figure out how to get those textures into the application process. That is probably harder than just check the box of the things you have an opinion on, and that'll help us, I think, have a smaller table, more productive table.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Great. Councillor Wong and then Nolan.
Great, thank you, Madam President. Gosh, yeah, some of the lived experiences really kind of struck a chord with me, and I think one thing that I saw that was missing was immigration experience. You know, our region keeps growing. A lot of that's from, you know, immigration from around the world, and I think that'd be a valuable perspective to bring. I think I had said something before about like productive contrarians and avoiding groupthink. I think that's, you know, it'd be a really valuable perspective to have. And I think, you know, part of my experience serving in this council was just being able to interact with folks that live across the region and maybe suburban areas that have different viewpoints. And that's been really great to help you know, form my own opinions as well. So just having that like intellectual rigor of healthy debate is going to be really valuable. And then I was just also caution us to be really thoughtful about like having one representative for specific constituencies. Like not every constituency is a monolith. Like none of them really are. So if you have one small business perspective, you know, that's not going to be reflective of every small business in our region type thing. So I think just like, how do we address that and think through that. And perhaps in the engagement plan, we might have specific conversations or focus groups with various communities, and then bring those back kind of through the lens of that representative would be helpful. Just because I would just hesitate to be like, well, we've got someone from this, community or this demographic, and we're all good because, there is no monolithic opinion. But other than that, I felt like the committee size and constituency made a lot of sense. Thank you.
Anything? Okay.
Counselor Nolan.
No, I know. I was
Oh.
looking to you to see if you had any. Okay.
No, I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Counselor Nolan.
Thanks, lots of good thoughts. This round robin, I think, gets us to a better place than we would if we sat here individually and tried to approach it. I want to make one addition explicit, and that is when we talk about lived experience, I would suggest we also be conscious of living experience and intentionally make sure that we have appropriate parity or representation of people living in single-family detached homes and in multifamily homes. We've seen through the work on the UGR that the trend is going more and more toward what's being built is multifamily, or a higher concentration of multifamily than the historic existing inventory. And since this is a future-oriented effort, we should be making sure that we are including that perspective when we balance out the committee membership.
Thank you.
Good. All right. I will look back to you guys to close this out.
Well, I do want to ask that there is maybe a little bit more discussion on the specific point about a counselor's role on the commission, because I feel like that's maybe the one concrete point where there is not full agreement. And so maybe some further discussion on that and just airing of everyone's
So
perspectives
those
would
who
be
think,
helpful.
I'm just gonna do, those who think there should be a counselor. If you're in the middle.
Counselor on the Future Visions.
Yeah. Okay, can we just go quick around why? I'd like just to hear why yes or why no.
Don't start with me. All right, great. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I think when the council is involved, I think it demonstrates a level of ownership in the outcome that is more so than just the recommendation that is made to us. It's something that we are working with our community to build together. And I think the conditions have to be right for the power sharing and for titles to help create that right environment. But generally, I think that I've seen the committees where we have council involvement. I feel like we have the strongest outcome.
Counselor.
Although that's an interesting and valid and somewhat useful argument, I think it's the trouble is when you get a group like this with a limited perception, people representing different interests, there will be a tendency for the group to think that one counselor represents the entire will of the council, which is not true. Where everybody has different views. So I think that, and it's also reflexive since it comes back to the Metro Council in the future also for approval and discussion. So one person will be either at an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how you view it. So I think that the committee should come up with a vision that is sort of independent of influence from the council at that particular time. So I think it would be not productive.
Counselor, do you want to reiterate your position, or you're on the record, so.
Yeah, I spoke to it earlier. I just think that this is something that is of such import to all of us that we need to find a way that we are all deeply engaged, and we don't need a vote, right? Like, we have the ultimate vote. We will be approving the final thing. So why put one of us in the position where they need to vote to influence the rest of us?
Counselor Wong and then Counselor Nolan.
Just looking at our other kind of committees and structures, we have JPAC, we have Impact, we have Core, we have the Solid Waste Advisory Council, and they all have council representation. And I think that comes with a lot of trust of my fellow colleagues to represent us at those bodies and bring back information and kind of share a Metro way. And I don't see why this would be different. And I think this is just a way of making sure that the council is represented at these conversations.
Thanks. Councilor Nolan?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Councilors Gonzalez and Wong have really stated well my position. I think there should be a councilor and maybe two, although I do appreciate concern about the limited quantity of available seats. But having a councilor communicate back and forth, I think we'll end up with an evolution that stays in pace, that the committee won't be off kind of untethered to activities that the council is doing, but instead we will evolve together towards something that the council will end up adopting. Most likely, more comprehensively than if there was a body that went off on its own without a connection with the council and developed something that we were not tracking as well. And yes, we can watch the sessions that they have and read transcripts and all. But I think the embodiment of a representative from the council really will enhance the strength of their recommendation back and give credence and value and significance to the work that they're doing in ways that can't happen without a council member there.
Thank you. I just want to say before I call on my colleagues again, I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer, because I think there is a way to have council included and kept up to date and provide literally what I think is the oversight. Because you can be put in a difficult position as staff between bodies. So I don't think there's a right answer, but I do think that the conversation is bringing up some of the finer points of how to integrate, right? And what would need to happen if there wasn't a counselor on there, or if there was a counselor on there, or if there's more than one counselor. So I appreciate the conversation from that point, because I really don't think there's a right or wrong to this. But yes, Counselor, I have seen your hand up and on the screen. Thank you, Counselor Rosenthal.
Just the question, one of the questions that wasn't asked or answered is, to what extent will this have a voting structure or merely a discussive or consensus structure? Because it makes a lot of difference. For example, most of the committees we have where there is a voting structure, the Metro Council is merely a liaison and doesn't have a voting credentials. JPAC is an example. It's a different example. So what is anticipated to be the process structure of this committee may make some determination on the Metro role on it.
That's a really good question, Councilor Rosenthal. And I think we haven't talked about that. I can say that many of these groups that I have had the opportunity to be there at the beginning, it's been a really good conversation for them to talk about if they want to vote, like have a majority rules or a consensus-based approach. And we haven't had that conversation. So it's a really good question and we don't have an answer. But in the back of my head was that could be a really good thing for the commission to, they will need to vote in some way, but the majority or consensus approach is, I think, an option. And it might be that council feels strongly, it might be that you want them to have the conversation.
If they decide to have a voting structure, they could also be the ones who decide whether they have a Metro council on it.
Yeah, and we have to make a decision. So I think we're setting this up, so much appreciated. Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate my colleague bringing up that many of our committee's counselors are in a role that's non-voting while we're sharing the power with community and other local electeds. I had in a previous conversation with Lou brought up the idea of setting up the calendar so that council rotated through so that we were consistently a presence and we had a very clear space of designee, but we were sharing the responsibility. And I just wanted to bring that up as a third alternative. More complicated, not less.
Okay. Oh, we've got more hands up. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. Yeah, I think I appreciate the conversation. I think it's like, I think we're having real discussion, and I think this disagreement can be healthy and good to get to the best outcome. So I feel like what could be good, and I know over the last few weeks we've worked on really like strengthening, refreshing our council protocols as well. And so I feel like with this specific decision about Metro councilor involvement or not could also be the opportunity for the council if we do decide based off of, I don't think you're asking for a formal vote or not, President Peterson, but as we make that decision, like maybe having clear expectations for what that councilor would do, how regularly they would need to check in, and just really setting up the clear expectations for how to, ensure that everyone's voice is being included and whatnot. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm going towards my brain is in terms of a process, the process of what engagement means and what it means to be a counselor on that committee.
So I don't mean to punt this, but we are over time. I guess what I would say is what I'm hearing is that the majority of the council is interested in council participation on the committee and council participation. Just how do we all stay involved in the process? I think we can figure out how we participate with that one position and kind of work that through, because I'm hearing multiple ideas, which I think we can work out before January is seated. Unless somebody's got some sort of brilliant idea. I think I've heard a lot of good ideas. So I think it's a little hard to distinguish between them. But I think what I'm hearing is that there should be a counselor on there. Who and how we're represented would be another conversation.
Thank you, President Peterson, for reading my mind and turning this way. I just want to support the concept of having very clearly defined roles and expectations. I think that makes it really helpful for staff as we figure out, how to staff you or however you council you as a group decide to engage on this body. I think that just makes us all work better together. So just wanted to really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and it's I'm glad Councilor Gonzalez brought up that portion, because we have been trying to figure out as a council how to have liaisons, right? And what is the role of a liaison? And that's essentially what this would be, is a liaison to the committee. Defining the roles and responsibilities, expectations, whether it's a rotating assignment every 3 or 4 months, or whether it's for a year and a half. We've all had good experiences and bad experiences. And I think we just have to learn from both of those and apply that forward into your conversation. So I think we'll get back to you on that specific, but for now, I've seen enough interest in a counselor being on the committee.
Thank you. Thank you. So President Peterson, I know that you're ready to wrap up. Can I so I think this conversation has been really, really helpful to us. We are really excited to get this process moving along. We have so much more to talk to you about. And we're glad we have time with you in October. Before October, our current schedule has us opening up this application process. And so we will take everything that we've heard from you today, incorporate it into that. I think that doesn't change your ability to continue to have conversations about the commission itself, the work scope, and the engagement as we're moving forward. But I want to confirm that you are comfortable with us taking what we've heard from you and developing this application before we meet again in October.
And I think what I'm most concerned about out of this conversation is the mission. How do you ask somebody to be on something and set the expectations from the very beginning of what they're applying for? And then how does that flow into the application process? So.
Okay. So,
unless you have a workaround.
We have clear guidance from our charter that what we need the commission to do is renew, refresh the future vision for our region. And we have a future vision. What we haven't done is identify any other work that you would want the commission to do.
I'm not trying to change the scope. I'm trying to be specific about what this is and what it's not. There's sideboards that need to be put on it, and when those sideboards happen, I guess is the question.
Okay. Maybe we can put something together and share it with the council, with counselors, and talk. Maybe we can do some either email or briefing conversations, because I feel like we have great feedback from you on a lot of the characteristics that you're looking for, on all of that. And so it's this one piece that we're not going to be able to get at in this meeting right here.
Yeah.
So if we can come to an agreement, and I'm looking at Marisa, I'm looking at you, President Peterson, and the rest of you. If we can come to that agreement on this mission that is really clear, then are we comfortable? Are you comfortable with us moving forward?
Yes, I just want to make sure that when people apply, they know what they're applying for and what they don't have an expectation of something else.
100%.
And that we don't, 3 or 4 months down the road, get questions about, well, why can't we talk about this?
I think that makes sense. And I will just, we are really aiming towards this January beginning, because it is, if we don't start, then we'll never be done. But it is.
Wow, that's deep.
It is, and we are like 15 years late. Our charter says that we need to update our future vision every 15 years, and we haven't done it yet. So, but our deadline, our timeline is self-imposed. And so if we need to take more time, then we will take more time. If we can move forward, then we are happy to do that.
All right. If it's a week or so off, I'm sure the 15 years plus or minus will be dust in the journey to get here. But thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Looking forward to that. Councilor Rosenthal, you had raised your hand again.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. Okay, we're good. All right, why don't we move on to COO communication?
Thank you, President Peterson. Just a quick add-on to that conversation. I think, as we begin to advertise and, prior to advertising and publicly sharing this application process, we would want to come to policy advisors and engage with you all on the materials and make sure that everybody's on board with how we're characterizing the mission, especially externally. So just wanted to add that.
Thanks.
A couple updates for me. First, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge and thank the campus operations team for all the work that they did while council was on recess. They did a deep clean and refresh of the council chambers and the offices and everything. And, I think I come into the office and it's always just so nice and beautiful, and it didn't think it was possible for it to be even better. So really want to just shout out to that team that does their work just so well, quietly, without a whole lot of fanfare, and really acknowledge those folks. And then second, just also wanted to shout out to all the managers, supervisors, and staff who worked through the heat wave that we had last weekend. Sounds like we're going to get some rain tonight, so fingers crossed that we don't have too many more of these heat events, but it is just a fact of life at this point, that we're going to continue to be challenged by these extremes. So thanks to everyone for supporting us through that, and just let me know if you have any questions about our response. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Counselors, Counselor Communications? Counselor Gonzalez?
So, just want to thank the folks, especially Councilor Rosenthal, for who joined me on Saturday for the TV highway cleanup. We had, I think, close to 40 volunteers, and we picked up a lot of trash in Cornelius. So it was an awesome event. I was really happy, Counselor, that you were able to join. And yeah, it was awesome. And thank you to the Metro team, the RID Patrol, WPES team. A lot of folks contribute to make it happen. And we had Malou out there, we had Jess out there, a few others that, took it upon themselves to go on a Saturday. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, hope we can get more Metro people out there in the future.
And belated happy birthday. Awesome. Anybody else? Counselor Lewis?
Sure, I forgot to announce that the Stafford Hamlet had a very successful Family Fest, celebrating good architectural heritage close to home.
Awesome.
Congrats to them.
Anything else, counselors? Counselor Rosenthal?
Yeah, I think I mentioned already that, and I appreciate Representative McLean and Senator Gorsuch, because they presented early in the morning on Thursday to the WEA Transportation Committee, and then they made the same presentation early in the morning to the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce and other chambers of commerce on Friday morning. So they really are burning out the shoe leather, as they say. And then also I want to say that the zoo held a very nice and effective and very pleasant appreciation for the volunteers. There were quite a few volunteers that showed up. Some have been doing it for 25 years. Some of them are bilingual. And so it was a great event and a beautiful day.
Awesome. All right. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we are adjourned, and I will see you back here on Thursday. Thanks.
President Peterson, we're
Yes.
actually adjourning to an executive
That's right.
session.
Sorry, I was
That's
just
okay.
on. Let me go ahead. We are adjourned to an executive session. The council work session will now be moving into executive session, which is being held pursuant to ORS 192.660, sub 2, sub E, to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions, and ORS 192.660, sub 2, sub H, to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Our next regular meeting is Thursday. And what room are we meeting in?
Room 375.